In the U.S. has banned airline passengers on certain flights from carrying on large electronics on the plane itself. Instead, those items will have to be checked. The restrictions apply to 10 airports in Middle Eastern and North African countries. iPads, laptops, and cameras are all included. American carriers are not affected by the ban, but experts say many flights will still be affected every day.
There are probably more flights coming from the Middle East to New York and LA than any other airport. So we could see somewhere between 3 and 7 a day that are affected by this ban.
Cell phones and medical devices will still be allowed to be carried on the plane, but U.S. officials say the ban is only temporary, and the U.K. has also joined in that ban. We're now being joined by a former CBS News reporter and the current editor-in-chief of the online newsroom, VoyageReport.com. Mark Albert was in a briefing yesterday, or at least a briefing on a call last night about this ban. And Mark, what have you learned about it?
Good morning, Eric. So on that briefing call with reporters, senior administration officials told us that evaluated intelligence told them that terrorist groups still want to attack commercial aviation, aircraft, airliners. And what worried them most was that these terrorist groups, they think, are aggressively pursuing what they call innovative methods to try and pack explosives into various consumer items that you and I use every day. Hence the ban on these iPads, laptops, DVD players, electronic game devices, etc. What really made them take notice, Eric, was this explosion on board a Dalo Airlines flight last year in Somalia. At the time, it was those dramatic pictures of a hole in the side of the plane. Thankfully, the plane had not gained enough altitude where it would have been catastrophic, but the blast inside of a laptop killed the bomber and blew a hole in the side of the aircraft. Thankfully, they were able to land okay.
And Mark, that blast was a year ago. Why such a long time in between to instill this ban, and why do they pick the certain countries they chose?
And that's a great question. We asked that. Certainly they have had information for some time. They said, however, that recently they became convinced that this could be more possible, that terrorist groups, lone actors could be able to get enough explosives to make it more successful, quote unquote, than it was on that flight. As you know, it only killed the bomber, but they were worried that they have now obtained enough technological expertise to do this. Now, as far as which airports they chose, this is very interesting, Eric, because the U.S. applies the ban on these 10 airports in these 8 countries, Muslim majority. But when the British issued their ban just hours later yesterday, they actually went with something different. They didn't do it by airports, they did it by countries. Some of the countries are different than the U.S. ban, even though both countries say they're working off of similar intelligence.
And they're working with, and they're banning fewer countries.
Yes, they're banning 6 countries, although their ban applies to every airport in those countries, whereas the U.S. ban, it does have 8 countries, but not all of the airports in those countries.
And Mark, just logic would say if they're planning to do that and they're in a certain country, but not all airports in that country are banned, wouldn't they just go to a different airport?
That is the great question. That is the unanswered question, Eric, which is why did they pick these specific ones, and can't somebody who wants to do harm to an aircraft simply go to another airport? They would not answer that question.
All right. And do we know how long the ban's going to last, Mark?
So initially, the U.S. said that it was indefinite. Curiously, though, Emirates Airlines, one of the larger Middle Eastern airlines, in their notice to passengers said it would last until October 14th. So that's about 7 months or so. So it's unclear right now how long it will last, but at least one of the major airlines affected says it will last about 7 months.
All right, Mark, and we're out of time, but if, again, on that flight where they did have that laptop explode, had that been at a higher altitude, it would have been disastrous.
It would have been catastrophic. And remember, Eric, also folks from New Orleans could very well be affected by this. You have a new flight beginning on Monday from Louis Armstrong Airport, British Airways going to London nonstop. So if you are flying back, let's say from Casablanca to London, you're going to have to check your bag all the way through. You would be affected by this.
All right, Mark, thank you very much. Appreciate your reporting.